So today we're having our SRO task force meeting, Thursday, July 19th, 2018. My name is James Sambamatsu. I'm at the Department of Building Inspection, Housing Inspection Services. Let's call the roll. Do you want to call the roll or should I?
We all just call.
Okay, let's do introductions then.
Darren Jordan, tenant rep.
Larry Kessler, Department of Public Health.
Gina Butta, nonprofit.
Hi, I'm Diana Martinez with the Mission SRO Collaborative.
Good morning, Raul Fernandez Berrosal with the SRO Families United Collaborative.
Peter Keith, City Attorney's Office Legal Advisor.
Morning, Bruce Burge, Operator.
Margot Janetti, Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing.
Jordan Davis, tenant rep.
Jennifer Chongju, administrative support.
All right. So we have a quorum, and the first item would be the election of the chair of the task force. Rosemary was chairing this task force for about 8 years, I think, and she retired a couple weeks ago. So we need to elect a new chair. Are there any motions or nominations?
I would like to nominate Jordan Davis, tenant rep for the record. I'd like to nominate Jamie Sambamatsu. I feel like it's good to have someone from the department that houses us, and I feel like let's not shake up anything. Let's just keep going. I think you'd make a great chair. I've worked with you a lot, and I feel like you're very qualified to hold this position. Plus, you have good mediation skills, so that's a very yes.
Is there a second on that?
Gina Butta will second.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for giving me the honor of being the chair. Thank you. So the next item would be the approval of the minutes. Jennifer did these minutes for us, did a good job. Are there any changes that we need to make? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
All right, thank you. Is there a second? Diana? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, then to pass unanimously. Item 5 is a presentation on Proposition F, and our speaker, I think, is running a little late, so we'll skip that one, come back to it. Introduction of the SRO Task Force Bylaws Update. So Rosemary has been working on revisions to the bylaws for quite some time, and we need to update these, and we actually got some advice from Judy Boyage in the City Attorney's Office. So I want to take a couple of minutes and walk everybody through this proposal. We won't be voting on this today because the bylaws require advance notice of 10 days to make changes to the bylaws. So there's two sets of changes. Rosemary has hers in the dark red. Mine that I worked on a couple weeks ago are in the lighter red. So section 2, there's two sentences added, and Judy Boyage from the City Attorney's Office told us that we had to include this type of language to make sure that our purpose statement matches the purpose statement that's in the ordinance that was passed by the Board of Supervisors that created this task force. So that is why we added that. Membership. Now this is something that Rosemary had been talking about, And this is a suggestion. We don't have to go with this, but her suggestion was to add a couple more seats. The city attorney not being a seat anymore, that'd be an advisory role. The suggestion would be on page 2 of this, item 5, where it says member representing seniors and persons with disabilities. It updates from Human Service Agency to Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. Adds one from Adult Protective Services, and then changes the DPH seat a little bit, and also adds somebody from the rent board. This would give us 2 more seats. Now, the positive part of that, sort of the pro argument, would be to make it more inclusive, include different voices, also different city departments. But the drawback would be that we would need one more person to make a quorum each time. We would also have to go and try to recruit people, get buy-ins. We'd have to get these other departments to agree to have somebody on our task force. So this part of it, we should think about and decide whether we want to go that direction or leave it the same. Yeah, go ahead.
Jordan Davis, tenant rep for the record. The only thing about, of course, adding more seats, like you touched on this, is like issues around quorum. I was talking with someone from another commission who has like board seats and department seats, but like they said like the department seats there are non-voting, and I was wondering if that might actually be something to look into, so that way we won't have issues hitting quorum, because there's like other commissions, other boards and commissions where the department seats are non-voting.
Okay, it's an interesting suggestion. Any other discussion?
Just a little bit of change in the name. It's the SRO Families Collaborative.
Right, okay. So these bylaws were written in 2011. Any other comments on the membership section? Yeah.
Have the departments been consulted yet?
Not
or
yet.
the board or
No.
APS?
No.
Okay, because I think, as for APS, I know that they're under the umbrella of, I think, the Department of Aging and Adult Services, and it might be beneficial to have that person be from Department of Aging and Adult Services, so we can give that department the flexibility to appoint someone, whether an APS, a public guardian, or whomever. Just, I think, the greater flexibility
Yeah.
we provide, the more likely we'll get someone to be able to make the meeting.
Now, Robert was here last time, and we didn't bring it up with him, but he was from the rent board.
And then another comment, Jamie, on number 5. One member, again, it's Peter Keith, legal advisor. One member from an organization representing seniors and persons with disabilities. I might put and/or in there, just if we don't want to disqualify an organization. Perhaps it might not officially represent one or the other.
Okay. Other comments?
Just a question. This came from Rosemary, and she has done this work for a really long time.
Yeah.
I remember working with her. Did she make the suggestions because of what she has seen over the years and what's been coming up in terms of the agenda, or also because there has been input from this group around the need for that?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Can anybody answer that? Has this been coming up at other task force meetings in the past? No. Yeah, maybe this is more of a Rosemary initiative.
I mean, not to discredit it
No,
at
yeah.
all, but adding you're taking one away from HSH, which is great because, really there was two different departments that had these two seats and now they're one. But, adding so many members, it's harder on the quorum, it's also harder to really, besides the quorum, it's harder to rely on people really being here because everyone has so much on their plate, so the kind of input might not actually be there in the way that it was maybe intended.
Other comments?
I
Yeah.
do have one little suggestion and one sort of process thing. I know Supervisor Kim's office has been looking into having more tenant seats, maybe up that a little bit, and also I'm pretty sure this is going to require the updates to the this is going to require legislation from the Board of Supervisors because we're sunsetting and we're going to need to
Right.
because there's specifically spelling it out.
So that's an excellent point. So maybe what we ought to do is keep the bylaws basically the same for membership until we change the ordinance. Because in the fall we're going to have to change the ordinance because it's sunsetting. So
And the Jordan Davis again, if the ordinance is passed, say in the fall, would that go into effect immediately, or would it go into effect after sunset, after the current iteration sunsets?
well, when it does sunset, we ought to pass it before the ordinance sunsets, but
Ordinances typically have effective dates of 30 days after signature by the
Okay.
mayor, so it would have to be passed, allowing enough time for that. I mean, you can have an emergency ordinance with a shorter period, but I don't think that this would qualify as an emergency.
right, okay. So what I think we ought to do is let's keep this on the agenda as far as the membership goes, and then we can work on the other changes to the bylaws, make sure those are all squared away for the next meeting. So why don't we continue down through some of these changes. We have some language stricken about unexcused absences that Judy asked us to strike. We're talking a little bit about audio recordings here. That Rosemary made that change. And then section 5, again, we're talking about the number of the members, but we're also talking about having somebody from the department that's chairing the meeting be able to chair the meeting if the regular chair cannot be there. Yeah.
Jordan Davis again, and I'm wondering if proxies could be sent, there could be enable proxies from any department, if certain people from a certain department can't make it, then certain departmental appointees can't make it, then they could just send a proxy. Wondering if that's possible.
Well, I don't know if it would be, because this is a special exception for somebody that doesn't vote, because there is something in the Sunshine Ordinance that says we're not allowed to transfer our vote to somebody else. But this is more just for running the meeting and administering the meeting. So it's a sort of a different purpose. But it's a good suggestion, but I don't think the Sunshine Ordinance would let us do it. So let's move on to the next section. Section 8, dismissal. Judy asked us to strike this section here. And then Article 3, again, we're talking about the number of membership. Section 2 is about audio recordings and minutes. So we went to a system of posting the audio recording on the website, but the minutes are also going to be kept the way they are now, in accordance with the Sunshine Ordinance. Yeah.
Jordan Davis again, and the thing about the 9-member quorum is we may need to have 9 members once we get up to 16, but until then I'd be a little shy about shy about like. I feel like maybe we should put in like something like quorum shall be half plus one, or like if we have an odd number, we have like half rounded up to nearest whole number. So that's just so like if the membership changes, that we don't have to like necessarily amend bylaws. It's just like half plus one or half rounded up to nearest whole number, depending on even or odd numbers of the task force.
Okay, I can work with you on that. Other comments? Section 4, Judy had us strike, or the sunshine ordinance should strike number 2. Section 6, it's about the date of the meeting. Section 7, special meetings, we're supposed to strike that according to city attorney. Article 4, Section 1, members present. This is so that whatever motion we're looking at, doesn't require, like, so if we have 8 people here to make the quorum, then you could still pass a motion by the majority of the people that are here. Does that make sense? And then we have vote by acclamation, so that's kind of what we're doing. And then on the last page we have members present, and then we have, you can amend the bylaws with 72 hours notice instead of the 10 days. Any comments on any of these? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll incorporate what we've talked about today, put out a version before the next 10 days before the next meeting. Oh yeah.
I did have one question.
Sure.
On the voting section, I was wondering why it said no abstentions are allowed. What is the reasoning behind that?
No.
It's on.
Could you repeat that, Chirac, so we can get it on the recording?
It's on Article 4, on the voting, Section 1, the last paragraph, towards the end, in the last sentence, it said no abstentions are allowed, and I was just wondering why.
Good question. I don't know the answer. I think this was language that just was part of probably with us for a long time, according to this section of the charter. What happens a lot at the Board of Supervisors is that people try to abstain for various reasons, and it's probably why we have it in here. But I can find out if we need to have it, if we have to have it. Yeah.
I should say my name, right? Margo Antonetti, Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. I am on other councils where that was part of the bylaws as well, and then eventually it was taken out. Because, otherwise people are just going to do what they do in the Senate, they just leave them because they can't abstain.
Which section are we talking about?
We're still talking about the same section. Article 4, Section 1, about the abstention. And so I've seen that before, but I've also seen it change for some of the same reasons that are being presented here, because otherwise what happens is that some people may just leave for 5 minutes during the vote and come back. And you see it, in the Senate all the time.
Okay.
So you see it on the board also.
Okay.
So Jamie, I don't know the answer, but if I knew the answer, I would say, but I think we'll have to consult with Judy. She's more conversant.
Okay. Yeah, she promised to have another version of me, but to me, of these, but she's going on a trip. All right, so we'll try to get those out for the next meeting, and we'll be able to vote at the next meeting on whatever changes we have. But it'll be essentially like this, and we'll incorporate the comments.
Jamie?
Yeah.
Larry Kessler, Health Department. I like Jordan's idea about maybe certain members, maybe just non-voting members. We are on some other task forces with the city, the Cannabis Task Force, where we're more of a consultant kind of role as a regulator for the industry. And I guess you're in the same boat here as well. Yeah. It's kind of an unusual hat to wear, to be a voting member and the regulator for community, trying to, you know, look at the whole problem situation as a whole, the owner side, the tenant side, and all that. So I think it's kind of an interesting proposal to have us attend, but maybe not be a voting member.
It would be a big change from the way that the task force has been going since 2001.
Okay. Just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, no, appreciate the input. Yeah.
So, Jordan Davis again. I was actually reading one of the enabling legislations from like way back when, and one of the things they mentioned was like, you know, they basically cut down the membership because like they were having trouble reaching quorums. So
Yep.
it might be we might want to take some lessons from the past, and because I know the past, like it was task force was like huge, like heard over 20 members at some point, and we got to like be cautious of that.
For many years, the task force was run out of the health department by Ann Cronenberg, and there were committee meetings going pretty consistently. Yeah, we've had quorum issues throughout. Okay. Carolyn Gold regarding Prop F.
I tried to no answers of yet.
Okay. So why don't we keep moving along? So we had a presentation last time on the visitor policy by Robert Collins from the Rent Board. And the last meeting we went through, he did a presentation on the visitor policy, which been with us for a while, which the task force was part of creating. So, is there any discussion on the visitor policy or on last time's presentation, or any issues regarding that? Yeah.
Dan Jordan, at the Collaborative, Central City Collaborative, we have one hotel that refuses, actually two of them, that refuse to acknowledge the hotel policy. And I myself have spoken with both managers from these hotels, and they say, well, because we're a nonprofit, that don't pertain to us. And I explained to her, look, it pertains to every hotel. That's an SRO, because it is the law, not select for nonprofit or for profit hotels. It's encompassed by all hotels. And she still refuses to accept the fact that she has to abide by this. So how do you get a hotel?
So that was part of the. So you weren't here last time.
No, I haven't been here for the last 3 months. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Robert talked about the process, and the rent board is a place that adjudicates that situation. So you would go to the rent board and file a complaint that the hotel is not abiding by the visitor policy, and the rent board would either give a determination or hold a hearing, or we would go through their process.
And then we have another one, the Ellis Hotel. the manager is still charging visitor fees.
Hmm.
And it's whatever she feels that they can afford as to what she charges.
Yeah, so that's another rent board case. You know, one of those groups one of our tenants groups that should be able to help you take the case to the rent board. And if,
We've got CIOP in
Okay.
our office.
okay, great. So that would be the avenue. Are there other, can I go to Margot and then to Jordan?
yeah.
Is that okay?
I actually just want to respond. Margot Antonetti, HSH. If you want to talk to me also after the meeting, because you said that those were nonprofit sites, please talk to me after the meeting and would like to hear what those are.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so Jordan Davis again, and I'll say the first thing I'm going to say is, like, you know, there's a lot of tenants' rights laws that don't apply to nonprofits, and that is something that the Mission SRO collaborative has been discussing and, like, you know, trying to navigate around this. But as far as I know, like, for this, like, this applies to nonprofits as well. It's the only thing that a tenant in a nonprofit can go to the rent board about, because we're not under rent control. The other thing I wanted to discuss is a potential change to the uniform visitor policy. Basically, last week, and this is going to become a regular thing at Mizrock, I held a listening session for my fellow tenants, and one of the things that came up was the uniform visitor policy. And from what I could gather, and there was a theme about loosening the policy somewhat, especially around signing out. As it stands right now, tenants need to escort their guests out of the while signing out, and that has actually posed a lot of problems for tenants who might be like working poor, because they work long hours, they work on conventional hours, and they work unpredictable hours. So there's a chance that that's really disadvantaging, and I believe Dan touched on this at another task force meeting about what's been going on. And also, Mission SRO Collaborative, and I'm sure Chinatown too, serves a lot of immigrant communities, and a lot of these immigrants don't have the access to government benefits, and thus are usually working to pay for their, whether under the table or whatnot, to pay their rent. So it's a very difficult situation, and I just want to say with this change, like, what I'm getting from tenants is some of them don't even want to even require sign out, like, at all. Like, they just want to go on the honor system. But what I would propose is changing the hotel visitor policy to require that a guest sign out, but the tenant does not have to be present. And another thing that's come up also is the fact that if your guest is a nuisance, that guest can be 86th, but the tenant has basically another chance within the next 18 months before they institute a 30-day visitor ban. Let's say a tenant's guest has been good. That guest doesn't sign out properly, or leaves without signing out. Tenant gets a 30-day ban, so the progressive discipline here doesn't make sense, even if the tenant was not being an actual nuisance.
Okay, so is there any discussion on any of those with Dan?
Dan Jordan. I have found that we get a lot of these same complaints in the office. I have made, I don't know how many phone calls to all these different places. I have dealt with, THC, which is our parent company, John Stewart, TNDC, all of these nonprofit places, as well as many private hotels. they have this policy in place to protect not only the tenant the visitor is visiting, but the other tenants in the building as well. And most of them are not going to change that policy. They want the tenant to escort their guest out of the building because a lot of these visitors do not leave the building if they're the person they're visiting doesn't escort them out. They go knock on other doors.
Do you have any hotels where this, you might imagine this happens?
Most of them private. We've had the same complaint over and over again from like the Hillsdale Hotel.
But it's 51 6th Street.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. The Baldwin House. It's happened in my hotel, which is 68 6th Street. Quite a few of the Tenderloin hotels.
Okay, thank you. How about Diana, and then we'll go back to Jordan.
Hi, Diana Martinez for the record again. It is true there are a lot of people who in the Mission neighborhood who work odd hours, particularly if they're working in the service industry. So it is very difficult to escort your guest out when they sign out, particularly if they're family visiting from other countries and they have a flight to catch at a particular time. It's very difficult. If we want to be inclusive of the immigrant population here in the sanctuary city, that's definitely something to consider.
Okay, so we're gonna go Jordan and then Bruce and then back.
I'll yield like for right now.
Okay, Bruce.
Yeah, I just what does working and escorting your visitor out of the building have to do with each other? I'm confused.
Oh, okay.
Are you saying that the tenant is off working and the visitor is in the building without the tenant?
Yeah, sometimes that happens. That happens with people who visit me. I know that it happens a lot with people who have
You
to
don't live
work.
in an SRO either, do you?
No.
Yeah,
But I'm
so-
just saying, in general,
Yeah, that-
when you
in
have
general.
a visitor, you can't always take the time off work. So when they sign out, sometimes you're unable to go with the person and sign them out yourself.
And my kind of understanding throughout, as long as we've been doing this, is that a tenant needs to be there if the visitor's there.
Mm-hmm.
Just straight up. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm going to be out today, go ahead and use my room. So.
It's not always possible.
Well, you say that, but I think that's the premise on this. If I'm going to visit somebody, they're there. I mean, that's the way we've always done it.
Not everybody can take the time off work to be there the entire
Well, then they don't have a
time.
visitor.
Or if they,
I can answer. Angela
Okay.
would like to answer your question. I think there are times where I have a visitor. Let's say someone visit me from another state. Oh, I have to go to work. You can stay a couple more hours so you can get ready to go to your airport or whatever. So the visitor might visit, but doesn't mean that the visitor is visiting that I have to be there all the time. Sometimes they need to stay a little bit longer. I have to go to work. Let's say you have a brother coming to visit you and they're in your unit, and then you say, well, you know, I have to go to work now, but you have to get out of the building as I go to work. That's not very good. Like sometimes you need your visitor to get a place to stay where they need. It doesn't work out all the time.
the other thing too.
Okay, we have Dan and then Diana. Dan?
I know with THC the policy is if you have a visitor, you have to be with your visitor. If you leave, your visitor has to leave. If your visitor's going to leave and you don't feel like escorting them down, then you get written up. It takes 2 minutes to escort your visitor out of the building. Why can't you just escort your visitor out?
Okay, Diana?
Thank you. I agree. It's really convenient if you're there to be able to walk out. with your visitor. But if you're unable to be there, that's what the thing is. And what we found in working with a lot of SRO tenants is SRO tenants, whether it's work or whether it's a doctor appointment, whether it's a case management appointment, an appointment to get better housing, or whatever the case may be, there are commitments that are very, very difficult if they break those commitments. And so I think that we need to consider what the reality is for this population. And the reality is they may or may not be able to escort their tenant out to sign out. I think it's fair that they sign them in, right? But signing out, I think that that's something that their adult guests can do on their own. If there is a nuisance, that's where the landlord is protected by the lease and can act if there is a violation of the lease in that respect.
Jordan?
Okay, yeah, just wanted to, Diana filled out the, what I was about to say. Look, we SRO tenants are adults. We should be treated like adults. We should be able to, like, tell our guests, like, you know, I trust you to sign out. And if you don't sign out, like, you know, that's going to hurt me the most. And I feel that's what, and a lot of tenants in the Mission feel that way. And also, and to the point of nuisances, the owner or operator has every right to deal with nuisance guests. They can 86 them like pretty much immediately according to the policy. If they're like acting up and causing problems, I don't want to take any of that away. But as an SRO tenant, I want to be treated like an adult, and many of us agree too.
Okay, anybody else? Sure.
Yeah, just GDOT speaking as a nonprofit operator. So when these visitor policies were initiated, they're definitely restrictive, right? Most people who have housing who don't live in SROs don't have to follow this kind of policy, right? I have my own place. People can come and go as they please. I can give someone a key to my place and they can go throughout the day, right? I'm an adult. I have responsibilities on me. If there is a violation of my lease, the landlord can then ding me for it, right? The penalty will be on me. Relaxing this visitor policy, which, you know, in its restrictive phase, has definitely caused a lot of, let's say, tension between operators and residents. Loosening it on a very minor basis, where it's, you can sign them in, cool, but if they want to leave, I can stay in my house and my room, and they can be on their merry way and get out of the door. If they don't follow these rules, as Jordan had mentioned, you know, the policies favor the landlords in this case, because they can 86 someone, they can put penalties on someone. And so, I mean, Mission Housing would be in favor of opening up the relaxing of some of these rules and allowing adults to exit without someone signing them out. I mean, for us, you know, a lot of our residents in the SROs that we have also have disability issues, right? And, you know, the elevator is usually running. Sometimes it isn't, but sometimes it's a nuisance for someone who has a wheelchair or a cane or a walker to go down all those stairs, or to take that time to do so, just to do the very minor thing of signing someone out, right? That's not a intensive process, right, for the visitor to do. So we don't see it as an issue to allow guests to sign themselves out.
Other comments?
And I'm wondering.
Oh, Bruce and then Jordan.
Then you don't need to. There's nothing requiring that you maintain this. You can do anything you want. You don't even have to have a visitor policy at your property. You just keep the door open 24/7. I mean, you can do that.
That's great.
So do that. But we don't need to change the visitor policy for everybody else to accommodate what you think is fair.
Yeah, for a direct response, we could do that, but currently the item is on the uniform visitor policy, we agree with the tenant advocates and the collaboratives that it should be lax a little and people should be able to exit without having the resident with them, but just exiting.
Yep.
So that's what our stance is officially. Whatever else we decide to do about our own buildings and our own policies, we will handle on our end. But currently, we're talking about this document and our opinions on this document.
Bruce and then Margaret.
Fair enough.
All right, I'll yield to Margot.
Oh.
I'm good.
Okay. So there are just two things I want to say. There is actually, it's actually stated pretty clearly that caregivers or disabled tenants shall be exempt from certain limitations. So I'm really glad that that is in here. I haven't totally read these front to back in quite a while. But one of the things that I'm hearing is really the difference between having an overnight guest versus having somebody that's basically on vacation staying with me. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing. And so that makes it a lot more difficult to, if somebody's staying, I'm just using myself. I know I don't live in an SRO, but I would feel that way if I live in an SRO. If I have someone staying with me, I wouldn't want to for 3 days, because of course I'm staying within the visitor policy. I wouldn't have to, go in and out with them at all times. But it's hard, I think, for an operator to make that distinction. And so, but those are the two different things that I'm hearing, that one person is more talking about overnight guest versus having, visitor for a longer period of time within this policy, of course.
Okay.
It's just the remark.
And the visitor policy already provides an out for not having to escort your guest out of the building and sign them out. And that's they leave their ID at the front desk.
Okay, George, go ahead.
That has been a big problem in the past, and that's actually led to either identity theft or them losing the ID. I was actually reading an article in Beyond Cron about this, about how they had to get the police to come and because the desk was claiming that they lost the visitor's ID. And then the police asked for the desk person's ID, and they wouldn't. They said the desk clerk didn't even have ID, and the police said, okay, we'll arrest you until we and detain you until your identity's been determined. And then of course they said something. Then of course they mysteriously found the ID. So I'm just we've seen this happen. We've seen a lot of crap around this, and I just don't see the need to for any manager to even hold an ID. And it's just, like I said, we deserve to be treated like adults. And although we're still, if we make this change, we're still going to be more restrictive than most apartment complexes. We feel that this is a measured move, and once again, the owner or operator still has the right to throw out a guest that's being a nuisance, and that's not. I will never, ever, ever take that away from you, Bruce.
Okay, Dan.
If you read the policy, they're not allowed to hold the ID.
What does the policy say here? This is
Number one.
2.
And number two, for an out-of-town visitor, exceptions are normally made. We're talking about people coming in to visit. Maybe the Mission has a lot better residents and tenants and people out in that district, but I'll tell you, for the Tenderloin and for South of Market, no thank you.
So
Half these people down there I wouldn't want in my building.
So Dan, I've spent a lot of time for many years in the 6th Street hotels and in parts of the Tenderloin, and especially on 6th Street. If you haven't lived, I haven't lived on 6th Street, but I spent a lot of time on 6th Street. It's the security issue is big on 6th Street. So I can remember people at the Seneca Hotel 20 years ago, they basically didn't want anyone to ever have a guest in their building. So I've seen both sides of this thing for many years, and it seems like different parts of the city are better able to accommodate loosening this kind of. Well, I think for some parts of the city, it's a really, it ought to be relaxed. But I think there's a few pockets of the city where I think people would be worried about relaxing them. Do we have any other comments, or do we have motion that anybody wants to make?
She had a public comment too.
The public comment, we usually, let's see, how do we do that?
And, I also wanted to make a comment on that, and I do, Jordan Davis for the record, I live in the Tenderloin, and I live at the Heartland Hotel, which is probably one of the better hotels in the THC's portfolio, and I've never really had a problem. It's mostly you don't see too much too much happening in terms of visitors acting out or really acting a fool or anything. And also I also had one instance of a nuisance when somebody who I didn't even recognize actually came into my room and was just laying down and reading the phone. I told them to I basically, once I got back, I was out for the day. I got back and I said get the F out of my room, and point is we've all had our nuisances, and we just can't, we need to relax this, we need to and of course I'm gonna make a motion on this, but let's face it, we've got the ability for other hotels to modify the visitor policy to make it stricter, make it more relaxed. So I feel maybe it's time to take that leap to allow the motion I want to make right now is to allow for guests to sign out their allow for guests to sign out without the tenant escorting them out, and for us to send a letter to the rent board supporting such policy.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Comment, but it's not on the motion. So,
Okay, go ahead.
just as, to speak from my own experience, as someone who's actually lived in 3 separate SROs in the Tenderloin since I was a child, and on 6th Street, I have friends who I grew up with who lived on SROs in 6th Street. I completely understand the concerns that private operators and managers have. I grew up on those same streets with the same people who managers and operators oftentimes have issues with inside the buildings. I understand that, right, more than anyone else in this room. I also understand that a lot of the managers also are oftentimes of Indian immigrant origin, right? And I think it's a larger issue here beyond just laxing visitor policy and all that, or having it more restrictive, right? I think, just for the record, as an SRO task force, we have to address an issue that SRO residents, if we are going to designate them in a special category, right, then we also have to figure out a way that the city can work in the private market to make sure that the special category is somehow taken care of properly, right? There are nonprofit SRO operators and there are private SRO operators. Is there a way that private SRO operators can actually provide the services needed for the populations to make sure that these buildings thrive, right? And that people actually thrive in these buildings. I think it's a larger issue whether or not either we have enough regulation or whether or not it's whether or not it's the government's responsibility to actually play a larger role in regulating these, right? I don't have all the answers, but I do think that a lot of the issues may stem from some of that. We may need to have to address the issue of SROs from a more core viewpoint, right? That I think is much bigger than a lot of this, right? That means bringing a lot of people to the table, having a lot of difficult conversations, but also understanding the history of why certain people own SROs, in certain neighborhoods in San Francisco and why certain managers are placed in these areas as well, right? This is a decades-long issue as to how we got to this point, right? A lot of people know this already. And so I don't know if there's language, Mission Housing can definitely support putting the thing to the rent board, but we also don't want to put any undue burden on any private operators in the short term. I don't know if there's any way to, and I don't know how people might feel about this on addressing that larger issue in the long term, maybe for a future topic, but and maybe addressing some of the security concerns or some of the concerns around penalties that operators can maybe enact on residents. But I think in the short term, we've been very restrictive for a long time. This isn't loosening, this isn't opening up the floodgates a lot. It's simply saying that if your guest wants to leave, I don't have to go with them, right? It's pretty simple, it's pretty basic. If there are emergent situations that come up because of this, right, then it's our responsibility to then react to that. But I think perhaps it's on us to maybe be a little less restrictive on the most minorest details, right? Someone can walk out without me being there with them.
So I just want to pose a hypothetical question. So let's say somebody escorts a person in, they don't leave an ID. They're in a building where there's been illegal activity in the hallways, and the person is not being escorted out. Well, there's a penalty for the person who brought them in, but how does the manager know that this guest is with that tenant if they don't have an
Sign in.
They signed in, but they didn't. Do they show their ID when they sign in?
At all times.
Yeah.
Supposed to.
But
They're supposed to show their ID, but they're not required to leave.
it. So let's say I'm in the management of the building and I see this person wandering the halls doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. Am I going to be able to figure out who they are? And who they are, like?
If the records are kept properly, I believe
You're going to be able to. Okay, Bruce.
Yeah, I think you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. I've got a 20 unit building, I pretty much know who's where. I've got a 200 unit building, it becomes a little more dicey. It's open 24/7, people moving in and out. No, I live here. Really? And you got your overnight person who may or may not know who these people are. So yeah, I don't think it's possible.
Sure.
Not on your scenario, in all situations.
In general, yeah. And then,
I mean, if there's a situation where there are more residents than the current employees of that property can handle, then they would have to hire more employees. That's what we would do at our, that's kind of how it is. And really, people aren't going in and out. A lot of the SROs, especially private ones, we must be buzzed in, right? We can't, when I used to work for the Mission SRO Collaborative, we couldn't get into most of the properties because you had to be buzzed in, right? Or some of them only had a key that only the residents had, right? If any of this is being exploited, if there's in and out rules that are lax, that's being exploited by residents in the operator's perspective, then the operator has ways to enact penalties, right? It doesn't go the other way.
You keep saying penalties.
You can 86 someone, there are things that the landlords have, but let's not speak as if the landlord doesn't have any power here. They do. Landlord has a lot of power here, right?
No, they really don't.
It's fine. We can have a difference of opinion. I'm not here to debate that. This is an ideological issue. This really is, are we as a task force going to allow residents to let their visitors leave the building at the proper designated times, following all the rules that are in the uniform visitor policy. Just let them walk out of the room after they've signed in, showed their ID. The operator, the desk clerk, whoever's there writes all the information down, that if any problem happens, they can hand it over to the authorities, right? Here's the ID number, here's the name, here's the address on here. It's all the information that the government has on this visitor, right? That's all we have to decide. Are we letting someone walk out? Any larger issues that are clearly here, I think we need to address and have these hard conversations. But this is about letting someone leave a building at the designated times. No one's saying you can break the rules. No one is saying that, right?
Okay.
I'm not. Jordan was very clear that she's not saying that, right? I don't want to. If anyone's advocating for that, then that's not what we're trying to push here. Right? We're trying to push saying within the confines of current rules, a little tweak, someone can leave without having me go.
Okay, Dan?
From 2011 to 2016, the building I live in was run by an ex-convict. This person allowed anybody and everybody to come in off the streets. We had people sleeping in the hallways, sleeping in the stairwells, sleeping in the bathrooms. It was terrifying to the residents that were paying rent to even come out of their room at night to run down the hall to use the bathroom. Many of our residents were using their sinks because they were terrified to come out of their room. And this was because visitors didn't want to leave. Some of these visitors weren't even visiting people. And this is a 6th Street hotel, by the way. And at one time, when I first moved in there, it was one of the nicest hotels on 6th Street. Then it became the very worst. It's improved a lot now, but you know what it took to get it there? A major class action lawsuit.
All right, thank you. Margot?
I agree. This is a place to express opinions, not necessarily debate them. I do think that in the different hotels that I'm familiar with, which is mostly non-profit run hotels, it's been really interesting to often hear the input from tenants, and there are definitely a lot of tenants, not all tenants, but a lot of tenants who want more security rather than less security because they are concerned about themselves. So I'm just wondering if there is, you know, instead of just deciding something which does have, there is a lot more underneath this, right, than just this one part of this policy. You know, maybe there needs to be something like some pilot groups, some input. And I know you asked people in your building, you know, maybe there needs to be some input from people that actually live there, and that also talk about the different situations that we're talking about, because again, I think that some people here were talking about really somebody visiting, and I know we use the same term, somebody visiting and another person that might be more of an overnight guest. And that distinction isn't made here. And there are a lot of times, especially in the nonprofit hotels, there are ways to make sure that that gets treated differently. But I think this is really a larger issue, and I don't think it can just be decided around this table. There are more people that may want to have a word or voice.
Okay, Dan.
I think maybe we should invite representatives of both for-profit and non-profit hotels to a meeting, get their input before we make any decisions on this.
Okay, Angela?
Angela want to ask a question. Can you clarify for me what's the difference between the visitor signing out with the tenant and the visitor do not sign out with the tenant? What would be the difference between that?
I think in some buildings, there isn't much of a difference, but in some buildings, the
Like-
person doesn't necessarily leave when they leave the person's room. I think that's the.
What is the concern about not having the tenant, the visitor?
All right, Chirag, and then,
I'll yield my time for now.
Okay.
Diana Martinez for the record. Just a clarification. At least what I'm arguing for is that the visitors, they should, I think it's okay that they still sign out. I just think they don't have to have the resident with them to sign out. But I think to address your question, Angela, I think what the concern is that if the tenant leaves, that the visitor, people are worried what the visitor will do when the tenant's not there with them.
Bruce?
Well, so I'll stat that up to the next thing. I mean, there's a responsibility of the tenant to escort their visitor. Now, if the visitor is, I'm not saying you, I mean, maybe it's 25%, who knows, it's a number. But your visitor leaves your room and you are not there, or you decide not to walk him out, you have no idea where he went. He goes to another room, knocks on another door, goes and lives in the bathroom for 3 or 4 hours. You have no idea. Let me step that up one more.
So
If a nonprofit thinks it's a good idea and enforces the rule, then how is it, if THC thinks it's important in their building to have their tenants escort their visitors out, I can't argue against that.
Chirag, then Angela.
Angela.
Okay.
No, you can.
I'm a little bit not clear about if I have a visitor that can stay with me for a few days. Can I have a visitor stay with me for a few days? Yeah. In that case, there are times when I'm not there, my visitors are in the room. Then how can you make sure that if I'm not there, the visitor is behaving? It's just the same thing. They are leaving the hotel, then you let them go. I think it doesn't mean that when the visitor is there, then I'm always there. You understand what I mean? Your concern is about if I'm not there, then the visitor might knock on other people's doors. But if there are times when I'm not there, the same thing can happen. So the thing is, they're leaving, and I don't know if.
Okay, Chirag.
Yeah, this is Chirag for the notes. I actually have a question for the chair. If let's say in Bruce's situation, right, if visitor comes in, leaves the guest room, ends up in the bathroom, knocking on other people's doors, is a nuisance, right? What options does the landlord have in that scenario in addressing that issue? What can the landlord do? Does the landlord have any options there? Or does the landlord have to let the visitor knock on doors, sleep in the bathroom, et cetera, et cetera? Is it just that black and white, or are there any penalties? What options are there?
Do you know the answer to your own question?
Not fully. I would like to know from someone from the city.
So say that scenario again.
So basically what Bruce had mentioned, right? Visitor comes in, signs in with the resident. That's all fine. And the visitor leaves the resident's room, causes a disturbance. Is in the bathroom for 3 hours, sleeping in there, is knocking on people's doors, doing whatever they need to do, right? Or doing whatever that they're doing, but they're not exiting the building. They're creating a nuisance and a problem, right? For other residents, for the landlord, for whomever, right? What can the landlord do in that situation? Do they have any ability
They do
to
have
address that?
Well, they do have the ability to address it. I guess the question that I've always had is that how do they know which tenant was responsible for bringing the person in?
When they brought them in, as of right now, the tenant has to be with the visitor. and then the visitor has to state what room they're going to. It's the tenant's room.
So if the tenant, the visitor leaves the room and starts doing stuff, how does the landlord is able to get the guy out? But how do they know who this guy is? Can the landlord? What's that?
No, go ahead.
Does the landlord have the ability to make this person prove who they are when they're walking in the hallway? I think that would be difficult. I don't know if probably the police would have to do that, I guess. Right?
Oh, well, is that option available for the landlord to call the police on
Yeah.
someone's in the building who's
Yes.
not allowed to be there at that time?
Yes.
So that option is available for
Yes.
the landlord? Okay.
Yes. Dan?
THC policy is the, quote, visitor would be 86 from the building. The tenant gets written up. After 3 write-ups for the same thing, then the tenant is facing an eviction.
Okay. Bruce?
So,
You have something you want to add?
Well, I'm just, I don't know if that's true about eviction. I know there's a suspension of rights, but
yeah, well,
I've seen a lot of eviction
you're right.
cases
Suspension
and
of
it goes on
rights.
for months and
I'm
months
sorry.
and months.
There's a suspension of visitor rights, and then if it continues, you face eviction.
Yeah, I would just like to add that under your scenario where there's no responsibility of the tenant to escort their guest out, then the moment the guest leaves the room, the tenant's like, he told me he was leaving. I can't be responsible for him knocking on doors or sleeping in the bathroom, for God's sakes. He left.
Okay, other comments? Anybody? Diana?
Yes. In this case, though, whether or not, like, under this policy, whether or not the tenant claims that the person said they were leaving, they're still responsible for them now. So this tenant can still be like, oh, they said that this, but under this policy, the landlord can come back and say, actually, when you signed them in, you made yourself responsible for them, whether or not you knew they were coming out when you asked them to. The landlord has the power to call the police when someone in their property is causing a nuisance. The landlord has the right to, once they figure out whose guest that was, to do what they need to do to penalize the tenant whose guest caused the nuisance. The landlord has the right to enforce the rules. This is the only thing that's going to change in here. This person would still have to sign in. This person would still have to be escorted in by the tenant. The person would still have to sign out. What I'm proposing is that they can sign out and leave the building without the tenant being there with them.
Any other comments? Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Peter?
So Jamie, I have a question. Which agency has the authority to issue and amend this?
The rent board.
This provision. Okay, so there's a couple of limitations on, I think, what we can, well, there's a limitation on what this task force can do, and then it's also a limitation on what the task force can do at this particular meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So what this task force can do, we can't change the policy. We can only there can only be some proposal to recommend to the rent board that it, make this amendment. But then the other issue I'm a little concerned with is because there wasn't a specific proposed amendment that was agendized, that making that recommendation to the rent board and the nature of the recommendation was not properly noticed. So I think it would probably have to be, a specific amendment would have to be noticed for a meeting.
Well, we did, this was our attempt to try to agendize it so we could take it, because we wrote visitor policy, sign out rule, and IDs, possible action. So our intent was to try to agendize it so we could do that.
I'm a little concerned that the nature of I mean, I think if you have a proposed amendment, of course, the meeting can further sort of discuss what the nature of it would be. I'm a little concerned that there wasn't a proposed amendment. But again, I mean, since this is just a recommendation and we don't have power to actually change the policy ourselves, this agenda if that agenda could be sufficient.
All right.
Yeah.
Other comments? So I'm going to, there's a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Can the motion be repeated?
What I have is a motion to send a letter of support to the rent board to change the visitor policy so that guests can sign out without a tenant escort. Is there a second? Deanna Martinez. Is there any public comment on this subject?
Hi, my name is Francesca Manning. I'm born and raised in the Mission, and over the years I've had many friends and loved ones who have lived in SROs for some periods of time. And I came because I heard about this amendment, and I've heard from people that this is basically a question of dignity, of human dignity, of respect, that tenants are able to be treated with a level of dignity so that they can allow their visitors to leave without them being present. And so I just came in support of that because I'm also on behalf of other organizers in the Mission who have who hold this position as well, and really appreciate this group's dedication to not trying to, treat SRO residents as if they are basically children. Because for me, this this policy is very similar to like what you would get in a dorm room or something like that, or at a a boarding school. So thank you very much for bringing this issue, and I hope you will consider writing this letter.
All right. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion?
Is there any second? No second.
It was seconded by Diana. Okay. All those opposed? All right. Motion carries. Well, probably the most stimulating conversation we've had here in a little while. I appreciate everybody on all sides of the issue for putting forth very well thought out positions. It's a very difficult issue, very intense issue. It's not one that just came up today. It's been going on for years and years. So appreciate everyone's participation on that. Comment?
Actually, I do have a comment about the next agenda item. If
okay, so let's anything else on this item? Okay, let's move along on the agenda then.
And for a presentation from Carolyn Gold, she just texted me emailed me to say that she could not come, and since like number 5 was agendized, I'm wondering if like we could continue this. Like, I do have a motion relating to this, but like I'm wondering if like we could like continue this discussion.
Wait, you mean continue it to the next meeting,
Continuing
or have
it to another, and I guess in the Board of Supervisors parlance, and because we're running like really low on time, like in Board of Supervisors parlance, continue it to the call of the chair.
All right, can do that. Any objection? All right, so we'll move that one.
Request?
So this is item number 5.
Right.
We're
So
gonna,
that's just going to go next.
yeah,
Actually,
or whenever we can get her here.
but actually, I do want to make a motion on this, and I know like this is more of a discussion item, like, and I was expecting her to be here, but the motion would basically be to send a letter to the Board of Supervisors and to the Mayor's office, basically saying that we should make sure that this is that Proposition F is properly implemented without any carve-outs, without any, basically without any categorical exclusions or means testing, because that's come up, and basically that the Mayor's Office on Housing, which is actually the supposed to like administer this, like reports that gives updates us on the progress of implementation.
So I'm a little confused because if we continue this to the call of the chair, then we wouldn't be able to make a motion or have.
I feel like, I'll withdraw, I'll withdraw that for now and make the motion to the membership right now.
Okay.
Again, Margot,
Yeah, Margot.
HSH, again, I'm not really sure what the motion is.
So we've been talking about having this
Right.
presentation so
Yeah.
that we can become more educated on the.
I withdraw I'm sorry, I'm confusing people, but I'm willing to withdraw the motion to send the letter and keep it to. I'll just say continue it to the call of the chair. I'll make that motion again.
Okay. So, is there a second to continue this item? Mr. Rogg? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. So we'll continue that item. So we are on administrative announcements. Let's see, there are some issues regarding hotel conversion that have, we had the legislation last year. Angela was there for that. A lot of us were here for that. Jordan, Deanna, Shirag. And we have been intensifying our enforcement on the conversion issues. Joseph Barber is here. He works on that, Inspector Barber. And Joe, do you have anything you want to mention about hotel conversion?
Off the top of my head.
Okay. He's been doing a really good job, and we've come across one hotel in particular in Pacific Heights, of all places, that we are looking very closely at. So moving forward with our enforcement, Joe's been helping us, leading the way, along also with Matt Luton. And the Peskin ordinance has really helped our effort a lot. So, and a lot of you guys were part of that effort. So, any discussion? Next item: reports from the collaboratives. Anybody have anything they want to bring up? Deanna.
Hi, Diana Martinez. The Mission SRO Collaborative has a couple announcements. The first, we hired a new administrative assistant this month. His name's Julian Ball, and he's a new staff member at the collaborative, helping with some administrative things. And Dolores Street Community Services has an announcement. We have, after long months, we have finally chosen a new executive director. Her name is Laura Valdez, and she will be starting her first day on the 30th of this month.
What is she from? San Francisco?
I know she came from. She grew up in El Paso, but.
I think she's currently working in East Bay. I think she's currently working.
Okay.
Not currently, previously.
East Bay. Cool. We love the East Bay. Yeah.
Isn't the Mission Collaborative also starting a new tenant organizer program?
Oh, the Mission SRO Collaborative? Thank you for asking that. Yeah, it's not a new program, but it's the new cycle of our peer outreach program, yes.
What's that called again?
The peer outreach
Okay,
program, the introductory leadership program we have at Mission SRO Collaborative. We began that this month with the new cohort. There are 7 people in this group.
All right. Excellent. Anyone else from the collaboratives?
Yes, briefly, Raul Fernandez Berriozabal from the SRO Families United Collaborative. In addition to our ongoing code enforcement efforts, last Saturday we had Appreciation Day for all the families that we work with. We went to Golden Gate Park, had a lot of fun. About 200 people attended. Day full of festivities. Also, we are already starting the distribution of the Red Shoes program. Basically, a brand new pair of shoes for students and a $50 voucher for clothing, as well as the Simply uniforms, which are like free uniforms for those attending the schools in the San Francisco Unified School District. One of our agencies, Coalition on Homelessness, already started the free school every Thursday from 10 to 1. This is pretty much like a leadership training open to the community. And last, Coalition on Homelessness is hiring for a peer organizer positions. If anybody interested, I'd be glad to pass the announcement.
All right, excellent, thank you. Any other discussion from the collaboratives? Future meeting topics. So we have Prop F, we have the bylaws. There's a person from the planning department who wants to get your input on their what do they do with that? Community stabilization program. So we're going to try to get that on the agenda soon. Is there any discussion on that?
And also I know you meant Jordan Davis for the record again. I know you also mentioned we were talking about the SRO directory. Like basically it should be a living, breathing document, and we should, like, since we passed it in September of last year, we should have a little moment to review. We should have like a little review for this.
Okay.
Ability to review it, and I encourage in this 2-month sabbatical that we look
post
at it,
right?
Post it,
Sure.
and make sure that we get input, because there's a couple changes that need to be made, and I feel like it's a good standing item for September.
All right.
Yearly review. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, and I brought this up a lot, and this is kind of for the future. At that same listening session that I had last week with the Mission SRO Collaborative, we have a lot of tenants from the Mission Hotel at THC building, and what frequently comes up is the fact that we can't, is a THC-wide policy, and there's a couple of other nonprofits that do this that don't allow us to pay our rent by personal check. It's either the third-party checks program or the money order, and I'm working with the Board of Supervisors on that, and that should be like something that should be agendized soon, like a little later, like sometime during the fall.
All right. Angela?
I have a question about the resource guide that we put together.
Yeah, that's the SRO directory that we're talking
The
about.
directory.
Yeah.
Are we getting them translated in the major languages?
I don't know. We'll
I
look into
thought
it.
that was decided that we would have the languages, but when would that be done? That's the question.
Do you know anybody who could assist us?
The Peter Keith, I know there are approved city contractors for essentially translation services, because I know that there are certain rules about certain city documents that have to be offered in other languages, so there are certain contractors that are used for that purpose. I had to use them to do our code enforcement brochures.
Okay.
So there are qualified.
So you have their phone number?
Contractors. I don't remember who I got them from, so I can ask around.
That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you. All right. Dan?
I would like to make a response to Jordan's comment about rent payment. The reason the THC makes people pay by money order is because so many personal checks are kind of rubbery.
So I appreciate that, and that would be when we get it on the agenda, we'll have a full discussion about that. Okay, anything else on that item? Any public comment? Any general public comment? Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? All right. See you next time. Thank you.
Will you spend a minute with me telling me about